It's finally time to review Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. So quick synopsis of this book is we are following these two game designers. They meet in college, they get together, and then they decide that they want to make a game. From then, they kind of launch their partnership in game development, and they kind of build an entire empire for themselves. They also have another friend. His name is Marks, and he does the production. So it's basically this group of 3 people. They eventually get more people and start an entire company, but first we start with a group of 3 people who basically want to have a game development company. And we follow them for a span, a really long time. We follow them through their entire building of their careers, the end of college, and the entire building of their careers, and all of that. There's a lot of love in this story too. So we're also following all of their relationships. I would say this story is kind of sad. It's also happy. We're following a really long time period. This book is kind of big, so obviously you're gonna have a lot of information, but because we're following them for such a long period of time, I think the synopsis said 35 years. It feels like it's such a long story. Not that it drags, not that it's boring. It just felt so long. It felt like I was reading someone's entire life story, just like I was doing. It kind of felt like a lot at times, and it just felt like a very heavy story. What I really liked was it had both plot and character development. I felt like I knew the characters, but I also felt like the story was still a story. There was still a lot of action in the story. So it had both. So if you're a plot or character person, I feel like you would enjoy this book. This book also is very, very popular, so I can see why it's very popular. I feel like a lot of people are going to enjoy this book. Maybe not everyone's gonna say this is a 5-star book, but everyone's gonna enjoy it, I feel. I loved a lot of aspects about each character, but I also hated a lot of aspects of each character. Each character I loved at one point in the book, and I hated at one point in the book, which kind of just made me feel like I was in their world. I was also pretty happy to pick it up. When I woke up in the morning, I was happy to immerse myself in this world. So I would say the story felt round. It felt full. Also, I don't know a lot about game development, but I feel like I learned a lot about how, because each one of the characters kind of developed games differently. They were talking about their artistic experience in game development, and I felt like I really understood their process. Even though I've never made a game before, I feel like I could understand their process in developing games, even though I have no idea how the fuck to develop a game. It didn't get super heavy into any sort of science. It's not teaching you how to code. But I do feel like I was getting their artistic experience and their strategies to make a game, which also aligned with their character. I'm gonna say one thing I really didn't like about this book was the beginning. There was this relationship that was kind of it was kind of gross. Maybe some trigger warnings. I don't really know what trigger warnings are in this book. I really should probably before I pick up a book, but that made me feel a little icky. This relationship, there was some sort of uneven power dynamic, arguably abusive. So that I really did not like in the beginning of this book. And then in the middle of the book, there was a scene that was a little gruesome, if that is something that this makes you feel just weird, just don't read this book. But overall, I feel like I really enjoyed this book. Those two scenes, they weren't like total turn-offs, like I have to shut the book, like I can't do this anymore. It was just, I feel like some people should know that before reading the book. I say that the characters and the plot in this book were very solid. I honestly do feel like a lot of people should read this book and a lot of people would enjoy this book. And maybe a lot of people that are like artists, that are like artists like in game development, or artists in like maybe graphic design, or artists in some sort of other thing, would really enjoy this book too, because I feel like a lot of artists have their sort of way of making art. I think it would be interesting for a lot of artists to read about other artists making their artworks. I feel like a lot of people that create things would enjoy this book. Maybe people that are also interested in like startups or entrepreneurship would really enjoy this book too, because it's not like one of those stories that you hear about like in a TED talk about some like really successful person, right? And, like saying their entire life story. So if you enjoy stories that like how I went from here to here, I feel like you'd also enjoy this book. Overall, I feel like this book is really for everyone, unless those trigger warnings are really, really bad, then don't read it. A good 4.25. But yes, I think this book is really good, and a lot of people should read it, and the cover is also really nice. I feel like I always talk about the cover, but like it's really nice. There's like water, and this is like rainbow. I feel like this is a very solid story.